And welcome back into the Sports Source, the segment brought to you by A.G. Hines Company. Post-COVID, it's just not as easy to get products that you need, even when it comes to basic building materials. But with 100 years of contacts under their belt, A.G. Hines Company is the #1 place to start your building project. They have materials other companies simply do not have right now. A.G. Hines Company, located right in downtown Knoxville. They're easy to find because they're located on Hines Street. You can call them, you can visit them on the web, or you can visit them in downtown Knoxville. A.G. Hines Company. Okay, we are talking about the #1 reason for Tennessee's demise since 1998. You were at the absolute mountaintop. It was true for recruiting. We do that every spring where you show how many guys were going to the NFL, the kind of talent you had here. And after that '01 class, it was like ski slope. Ryan Callahan says that the big reason is what went on around Tennessee. The other schools in the SEC made changes. Other schools outside the SEC improved. Josh Ward says, look in-house, look at all the changes and turmoil and hubbub that's gone on here. You can't get on the same page. And Bob Hodge says, blame it on Lane Kiffin. It all kind of goes back to that. I'm going to go back further than that by one. And I'm going to tie into what Ryan said. I think it was the fact that you had a Hall of Fame football coach, and that's absolutely what Phillip Fulmer is, who deserves the Hall of Fame bid, but is not a Mount Rushmore guy. And here's what I mean by that. When you look at the Mount Rushmore coaches, the Sabans, the Spurriers, the guys who won multiple titles at multiple schools, they all adapted. They all changed. They all stayed ahead of the curve. When you look at what Tennessee did as Georgia improved and changed, and Alabama improved and changed, Florida brings in a guy from Utah who brings in the spread. Tennessee did what they did. We just do what we do. We know how to do it. And I don't mean that shouldn't be taken as a huge knock on Fulmer. Those guys who make those changes. Bear Bryant had won 3 national championships. It dropped off a little. He goes to the wishbone, wins 3 more. Most guys don't do that. Nick Saban goes from the defensive guy to saying, hey, can't beat him, join him, I'm going offense. Urban Meyer at Florida, his first year, the year he wins his first national championship with Chris Leak, he waters down that spread so it will fit Chris Leak because he can't run what he normally runs. Steve Spurrier, pass-happy Steve Spurrier gets to South Carolina. He's not having the success he did, so he gets on board with the spread stuff and starts running his quarterback. Those guys are willing to say, I know how to win, and I've been winning this way, but I'm going to have to chuck all that and do something different. And there's a reason those guys win multiple national championships, are discussed as the Mount Rushmore coaches. Most guys in business, most coaches, can't do it. You just say, I know the path to the title is right here. And even if you put a brick wall there, it's like, well, I just got to run through that wall harder. As opposed to, no, go around the wall. No, the path is through the wall. And I think that's what hurt Tennessee is the fact that you really didn't change much as the rest of the SEC was. So it ties into what you're saying. I just think that maybe had you been a little bit more outside the box with some of your thinking, and I know people will say, well, Dave Clawson was outside the box. Okay. I would also wonder how much leeway he was given the fact that he has been successful everywhere he's been except the 1 year he was here. He's gone to Wake Forest and done a pretty good job. He was great at Richmond. So I just look at what Tennessee did on the end with all those other schools improving. I think it goes back to Phillip Fulmer not being as forward-thinking. And to prove that, and I've mentioned this on the show before, when Lane Kiffin left, and someone in the media went and asked, would you take the job back? And he was like, absolutely. I'd go get my team back together. Wrong answer. That's the exact reason that I think it dropped off to where, and you look at it, no top 10 finishes those last 7 years, no SEC titles the last 10 years, no major bowls his last 7 years, more home losses than you'd had those previous years, more double-digit losses. There are a lot of people who say, well, you never should have gotten rid of him. It was just Tennessee fans couldn't put up with 9 and 10 win seasons anymore. That wasn't the case. He had a contract that would roll over at 8 wins, if you remember. What they couldn't put up with were 5 win seasons. And I think it just goes back to the league improved, and Tennessee did what so many businessmen do, what so many coaches do, and that is, I know the success formula that has worked for me. I just got to do it better, as opposed to, I'm throwing that formula out. We're going to do what those guys are doing. I think that was a mistake.
And I think that's exactly right. And to your point, I think one of the biggest mistakes Tennessee made during that time is they they relied on a couple of easy fixes they made that helped them sort of gloss over some of that stuff. They hired Trooper Taylor that gave them a boost in recruiting for a couple of years. And one of the things that fixed it toward the end of Fulmer's tenure, at least briefly, was bringing back David Cutcliffe, who was obviously the master architect of that offense. When you look back on it especially, it looks a lot worse during the times he was gone compared to when he was there. So that kind of glossed over a lot of what you're talking about. They didn't modernize. I always thought that 1997 Orange Bowl changed Philip Fulmer forever. He sort of saw what Nebraska did to them at the line of scrimmage. He went to a sort of more smash mouth approach. He used to be more wide open offensively in the 90s before that. That changed his approach and I think made him think, I need to stick with this, and it made him a little bit more conservative as offenses became a little more modern in the 2000s. He stuck with what was working before.
Except for the 2 years when Cutcliffe came back and he had Eric Ainge throwing it all over the yard.
Right.
Yeah, and then Cutcliffe left and went right back downhill. Guys, now that we've heard all four arguments, I think they all blend together. Have I convinced anybody that I am correct and that the rest of you are fools? Come on, Bob, admit it. Okay.
No,
All right, good deal.
But I mean, here's the deal, and unfortunately, that's what Tennessee's real problem is. It is all of this stuff.
Yeah, it's multiple.
And I mean, and it's incredible that one school has stepped into it and stepped into it and stepped into it repeatedly, doing as many things as they have done. I mean, I don't think anybody else around the country thought John Curry was a horrible athletic director. But because of the way things shook out here, you go out and you change athletic directors again. How many athletic directors has Tennessee had since Fulmer was gone? I mean, I quite honestly, you lose count of it. And where do you see that around the rest of the country? And so it is a bit of everything. I like Ryan. Matter of fact, I like mine the least now.
Well, no, I'll say this. I think Bob's point, it's almost two separate discussions to me. It's what caused Tennessee to not stay at the mountaintop after 1998, and then it's what caused them to go from 8-9 wins on a regular basis to what they are now. And it's been a lot of things.
You're an absolute also-ran.
It's been several things combined over 20 years, but it started with Tennessee not making the most of its window in the late 90s.
Yeah, and also, I mean, from a recruiting standpoint as well, I talked about the ski slope of the NFL talent you were churning out. That also goes back to what I mentioned with, it wasn't like you just had close losses there toward the back end of the Fulmer era. Miami came in and kicked your tail 26-3 at home. You didn't have that kind of stuff. There's a reason that the Alabama fan base came in here, took over the stadium, and Tennessee fans went, here's our ticket, we're staying home. You had not cashed in, as I think a lot of people would have assumed. When you hit the national championship, you think, oh man, nobody's going to get past us now. And that just didn't turn out that way. When we come back, and I think your answer, you may be able to repeat the same answer in this segment, or going a little bit.
Matter of fact, I've read ahead. I'm not going to say anything else.
So what we're going to do is biggest hiring or firing mistake of the last 20 years. What had the most ramifications? We'll discuss that next on the Sports Source. Come back.